misleading in a way was that it provided a strategy that was far more effective in targeting the indifference and complicity of the political and financial elites by suggesting clear projects that these elites could do if they wanted to remain loyal to their own alleged commitment to human rights, to civil rights, to international law, to international order. Of course, it didn't work everywhere. It didn't work well everywhere, but it began a process that eventually influenced more known human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch in America, the international legal system, in some countries also the government's policies, universities' policies, funds run by banks and all kinds of social institutions, pension funds, and so on. All that began to have, the BDS began to have some impact on it. And definitely, judging from the economic history of Israel since the appearance of BDS, it had some impact on Israel's economy, its trading options, and its cultural representation around the world. So it became a far more effective solidarity movement. The depressing side of it, and we're all familiar with it, that even with the BDS, even with the exponential growth of the solidarity movement or the grassroots level, with some even impact on policies from above, especially in some countries in the global south, the reality on the ground was not affected by it, namely the ability of Israel to continue its daily, monthly, and annual strategy towards the Palestinians, wherever they were in historical Palestine, was not influenced at all by the solidarity movement. To the point, of course, that the biggest frustration was that it hardly affected the Israeli genocidal policies in the Gaza Strip. Although I do think international solidarity movement was one important factor that brought to an end at least more intensive aspect of the genocide. Of course, we know the genocide continues incrementally now on the ground in Gaza, and the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank continues, and the discrimination and the terrorization of the Palestinians inside Israel continues. But a certain level of intensity, I think, was affected, was decreased by the influence of the solidarity movement. But it's certainly not enough. And it's a big question we're all asking in the solidarity movement. Can we do it better? What can be done more? And I had the impression from participating this year in about 10 workshops around the world, all devoted to this question. How did the solidarity movement fare so far, and how can it be more effective in the future? I can summarize few consensual conclusions that I think needs to be explored further and extrapolated in a much more detailed manner, but I will give them as sound bites here. One, a very clear and interesting distinction that people made between allies and partners. People use different terms, and it's much better to explain what they mean rather than be religiously loyal to the terms. There's a difference between people that you recruit for your struggle, even if you don't fully agree with their worldview, or even if you don't share every perception of the reality that they have, in order to have a very massive and powerful movement that can recruit, as it did in Rome and London, 1 million people. That was their conclusion, to be a bit less purist in the way you build alliances, rather than being too strict about it. Of course, red lines should be red lines, but they have to be more flexible in order to make it more effective, in order also to reach the political elite. I have to say, I have to be honest, this is totally challenged by the more hard left Marxist elements in the solidarity movement who want the whole struggle to be led by the working class and so on. But I think that since the Islamic communities in the West are now a very important part of the solidarity movement, it counterbalances these old Marxist ideas that only the working class can lead a purposeful revolution that eventually would change policies towards Palestine. The Muslim communities were a very important factor now in the West, in the Solidarity movement, take a more pragmatic view on the relationship with politics from above, different political parties, in order to make it a more effective movement. A different way of looking at it is the difference between urgency and strategy. If we do believe that there is an urgent objectives for the Solidarity movement, we work with anyone who is willing to stop the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, and the intimidation of the Palestinians in Israel, whether we are totally in agreement with them. Again, it's easier said than done because not everyone can be accepted. It's clear. But it has to be remembered if it's urgent. I wouldn't say you work with the devil, but you are just remember that you create a tactical alliance to stop a massacre, to save the life of a few thousand Palestinians. You don't strategize necessarily with all the people that are in your urgent alliance. You strategize with those you really share. Oh, those that the Palestinians ask you to share their efforts, because that's another point I will mention in a minute. So the difference between allies and partners, difference between urgency and strategy. Thirdly, and that came again and again, and I know that this is now for the younger Palestinian generation particularly important. Anybody who read Muhammad al-Kurd's book will know what I'm talking about. The sense among the Palestinians, especially those who live outside of Palestine, is that they are not giving enough voice themselves to present their own vision, ideas, requests, demands, and so on. That still too many people talk on their behalf. And they believe that it's not only a matter of correcting something which is unjust, but they think there is a much better chance for a more effective kind of solidarity if the solidarity movement would be much more receptive in terms of representing Palestinian voices in its activities. The sense is that, and I think they're right, statistically, if you look at conferences, workshops, demonstration, who talks in demonstration, who talks to the media, and so on. So there's a sense that this should be a very important point for the future. Other people talk about radicalizing the language, radicalizing the actions, all very interesting and intriguing points. I will not go all into them. I would finish by saying that we are in a very sensitive moment. The movement is exhausted. I don't know how it is in the global south. I hope to have a bit more knowledge about that in the future, because I am encouraged by the emergence for the first time in Thailand and Korea, South Korea, and in certain parts in Central America of new and young generation of solidarity movements with Palestine. But on the other hand, in the West, I feel the exhaustion. We cannot get 1 million people to demonstrate for Palestine today in London, in Paris, or Rome. No way. We tried. The demonstrations are small. Say, well, we've tried it. They also think, because of the media, that it's not exactly the same as the situation is not as bad as it used to be, and they're wrong about it, of course. It is as bad as it is, as it was. But the exhaustion is connected to this, this whole talk about the day after, that we are now having a peace process and so on. And one of the things, we have to disrupt this narrative in the solidarity movement. We have to work very hard to disrupt it, to make sure that people understand that whatever made them committed at the time of the genocide is relevant today as it was in 2024. It's the same level. We need the same level of commitment, because it's the same level of brutality, the same level of destruction. Believe me, it's not easy. I'm devoting much of this year to meeting with solidarity movements. And with this would be really my last point. We should not underestimate the weaponization of anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial that is used to deflate the solidarity movement, target its people, and so on. But it was very interesting to be inspired by what happened with the case of Palestine Action in London. Because the government proscribed Palestine Action as a terrorist organization, the sense among us was, what can we do? I mean, they're so powerful. How can we challenge it? And then came, first of all, the challenge on the street by the older generation of the solidarity movement. The youngest among them, I think, was 85. And to remove each one of them with the placards, we support Palestine Action, needed 25 policemen just to move one old lady. And it exhausted the police, but also show how ridiculous was the government's decision. And that influenced the decision of the High Court in Britain that cancelled the proscription of the Palestine Action as a terrorist organization. So there are models of success. I'm not sure they can easily be transferred from one country to the others. There are models of failures. France, unfortunately, is full of them, where the court system and also Germany worked against the solidarity movement. But a more comprehensive way of learning from the successful models is something that people are also discussing. Finally, the good news is there's a new generation. There's a new generation of people who just finished high school, very committed, very enthusiastic, not always very knowledgeable of what goes on. They need some, I think, to study a bit more, but not lacking enthusiasm and commitment. But it's still, the bottom line is that the cynical Israel Zionist lobby succeeded in creating a global alliance that immunized colonization, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, the counter solidarity movement, while galvanizing sympathy, empathy, support, was unable until today in any effective way to puncture in any serious way this shield of immunity. But we should be hopeful that it will happen because it also took for other solidarity movements in the past a long time to become more effective for the reality on the ground itself. So I will stop here, and I hope you all to meet you in the next episode, which will not be delivered by me, by other members of our great movement for liberation from Nakba. And it was a pleasure to spend 3 episodes with you. Thank you.